Right, so morning everybody, welcome to our May public meeting. Can I just start by saying a public welcome to our two new exec directors. We've got Renee, who is our Chief People and Purpose Officer, the longest job title in the world.
It is.
And we've got Mark, who is our new Director of Strategy. So welcome. Okay. Do you know everybody around the board table, Renee?
I do. Well, I think I've met every single person, and it's been lovely joining since 2nd of April. Really love the energy and the insights everybody shared, and look forward to working with all of you.
Okay, that's great, thank you. And I know you've observed a meeting before.
Yes, I know everybody as well, yeah.
Yeah, okay. Right, so we'll crack on. We've got a busy agenda, so I'm going to assume that papers are read. So let's start with the formalities. Apologies for absence from Mohammed Hussain. Declarations of interest. You've got a paper in the pack, as we said last time. If there's a new declaration, because I find that very hard to read, it's so tiny, then we've highlighted it in red. So the new ones this month are no declarations from Mark and Renee being noted on the log. Is there any other updates anybody wishes to make? Okay, thank you. And then minutes of the previous meeting held on the 14th of March. Is everybody happy to accept those as accurate?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. No. So we'll take those as approved. Thank you. And then matters arising. We've just got one from Southport.
Yeah.
Yeah. Papers there is read. Is there anything you wanted to add?
Not particularly. I mean, there has been a number of different conversations in different forums about the question of debt code and its relationship to Shimmy and our broader work in relation to confidence about that Shimmy score not reflecting the implications in relation to how we look after our colleagues and how we look after our community, because that has been asserted or where our confidence comes from our learning from death, where it comes from our work in relation to other standard mortality ratios, etc., etc. There are 3 steps identified to remedy the programme, the numbers going forward. 2 of those steps are in train. One of them is a more comprehensive programme of work with colleagues about ensuring that at the point of data entry we capture that as accurately as possible. The only other comment to make is that there will not be a demonstrable immediate improvement, because the way the calculation is achieved is on a rolling quarterly basis. So we will see an uptick in Shimmy going forward as a basis of the 2 interventions we've already made, and then we would expect to sustain and build on that with the 3rd intervention that's planned.
Okay, thanks, Paul. Any questions for Paul on that? Ren?
No questions there, but just to add, the very latest Shimmy results, which is just come out for ratification, which means to me every quarter does show a reduction in Shimmy. We would expect that to continue, but as Paul said, we wouldn't expect to see a significant reduction probably until about 6 months.
Okay, all right.
It looks like we started from January.
Yeah, all right, that's great, thank you. Can I just check, Sophia, can you hear okay? Yeah, okay, we've got Sophia online, all right. Okay, any other matters arising, Laura?
So the first one on the list of BO23003, that relates to a suggestion that we look at health inequalities in more detail at a board development session. I think that's potentially been superseded by the new sort of development plan.
Yeah.
So if the board is happy for that one to be closed, just wanted to check that. And then over the page, there's another one just to note around the NED objectives will be reviewed and agreed sort of this month, and that will include an EDI objective in line with the national EDI plan.
Yeah, and we've got those appraisals booked in next week, haven't we, everybody? Yeah. Okay, thank you. All right.
I think everything else is noted as completed, but yeah, obviously if there's any questions, happy to take those.
Okay, any questions for Laura? All right, thank you. Let's move on to patient stories. So everybody was sent a video link of Rebecca. has everybody managed to see that? It was a really powerful video. And one of the stars of the video was Emma, our matron from A&E, who's joined us today. So Karen, do you want to?
Yeah, so I think what this story highlights is people that come in with conditions that aren't easily diagnosed or treatable, but also some of the baggage that people have when they view people with these types of illness. So Emma's done a really good job of working with this lady, and I'm going to hand over to Emma to tell you about the improvements that you made.
Yeah, I think, you know, with Rebecca particularly, it's been about educating the team and also doing some work with the team on trauma-informed pathways and becoming trauma-informed practitioners, because I think we need to reduce the health inequalities of groups of patients that can be marginalised, not just because of trauma, but in general.
Yeah.
So it's about that whole education piece. We've also completely changed our assessment training, and we're refreshing that. Instead of you becoming a triage nurse and then never getting a refresher really again, you're a triage nurse. We're now going to do that biannually for everybody, so that anything that's current and updated, and as things change, you know, the staff are learning, and we can then share improvements and things that we gain from patients along the way. Because things change all the time, and particularly with functional neurological disorder, I've done a lot of reading around it since Rebecca, and you know, it was looked into as far back as Freud, and people termed it as kind of psychosomatic hysteria. And it wasn't really until about 2007 that they actually did MRI scans on people and realised that it wasn't at all psychosomatic, it wasn't at all behavioural. You know, it was actually a neurological condition brought on often by trauma, but by various other things. So I think, you know.
Is it just for the public who will be viewing this, just worth just describing Rebecca's condition? So we just mentioned it there. But
so Rebecca's got a functional neurological disorder, and basically it's often, hers is triggered by trauma. So if somebody's had some trauma, it can make the neural pathways in the brain kind of misfire and give you all sorts of symptoms, from paralysis in the arm to having a seizure. And it's extremely frightening because the person has no control over these symptoms. But they have been viewed in the past as kind of put on, made up, and that's been for centuries and centuries. And now they've been diagnosed as a condition. And a lot of the, you know, the ways to reduce those symptoms is by making somebody feel safe. Because at that stage they're traumatized and they're triggered. So it's just about understanding all those nuanced conditions can come into A&E, and as we all know, you know, things change, research happens, we get new guidelines. We just want to make sure that we're current in all of that, so that we're serving our patients. And I think the biggest thing that I want the team to understand, which hopefully through education in our meetings that we have, is that, you know, the patient voice should be the centre to everything that we do, because you can learn so much from their lived experience and from what they tell us. I think it's really important that we just keep that at the heart of everything.
absolutely, yeah. Okay. How have the team responded to the way
They
you
were
encourage
really interested, because there were some really good research articles about it, and obviously, you know, in A&E we know a little about lots of things, but we don't focus on one speciality. So until, you know, new things are shared, and they were fascinated by the fact that, you know, there's been all this new research out there, and it's really kind of really interested in learning more about it. And obviously the team all knew Rebecca really well, because at that point, I mean, Rebecca's doing really well now. She hasn't been in for quite a while, but at that point she was a very regular attender in A&E. So they were really pleased to kind of learn more about her condition, to be able to support her.
That's great, and really great that she spoke up as well and shared her story with us. So yeah, please say thank you to her when you next see her.
Yeah, I will do.
Has anybody got any questions for Emma? Julie?
Great story, Emma, and great work. When on the video, Rebecca looked really articulate, or she came across as very articulate. What can we do when patients come in and they're not as articulate? What can we do? Actually, in understanding Rebecca, we managed her care far better.
Yeah.
What can we do when we're not?
I think it's about listening to their voice and making sure that they have a forum to express what they need. And I think if we can try and educate everybody to be trauma-informed practitioners, then you're looking at not just what that person has come in with, but what they need. And I think that's the important thing, giving everybody a voice no matter what. Because we need to absolutely reduce the health inequalities. And, you know, different groups of people can be marginalised and can struggle to have, you know, the same experiences as others. And I think we need to make that a priority.
Yeah, just thanks. It was that bit about other organisations benefiting from the insight that this story provides, and therefore how do we proselytise is an interesting word, but that's the word that came to my mind. How do we proselytise the fact that these presentations will happen across the country, and that there is an appropriate way to work with presentations and with individuals, rather than assume that, as you say, 250 years of dismissing it as psychosomatic is a lot. It's a big tanker to turn. So is there a way in which we are able to use either is there a charitable route where there's an organisation that is collectively representing those interests? Is there a professional body? What do we do to make sure this message gets pushed out?
I mean, there is a national push for everyone to become a trauma-informed practitioner, and obviously to do some, you know, training around that. And I'm part of the national forum. But Bradford, I think, is leading in that because they've offered training to all of us as a trust. And I'm not sure how freely available the training is, even though I'm on some of these national forums. I think I can certainly share it with matrons that I know locally, but I don't know how we can share that wider. I don't know if you guys can go to the
You love me first. Why don't you speak to Amy Hunter and look at how we can write it up and submit it as a case study? Plus there's the emergency nursing journals and things like that.
Yeah, that's a good idea.
That's a really good idea. Yeah, great, thank you. Saj?
Yeah, thanks, Emma. I watched the video, and I think one of the things that was really powerful for me was the point where Rebecca talks about the doctors coming and apologising about where we might not have got it right originally, where we might have been a little bit dismissive of the condition. And I think certainly when we get complaints, and colleagues like Karen, myself, now and others, we read through all the complaints, we sign them off. And I think the fact that we can pick things up at the point where it's become an issue, apologise to the patient, recognise that it was an issue is really strong there. And it just highlighted for me from a patient experience perspective, the power and the fact that Rebecca was able to accept that apology and recognise that it's not everybody knows about the condition, but the fact that people took it upon themselves to go back and apologise. So I think there's something learning in terms of recognising when we don't get it right, that we can actually accept we don't get it right and apologise to the patient at that point, avoiding escalation, and is a good way of as really learning.
Yeah, that's a good point. So we've got Karen and Louise.
It's just to say that Emma's done a lot of work on wider patient experience in A&E, which has seen a significant reduction in the number of formal complaints that we respond to. And that's because yourself and Tanya and others are very proactive in speaking to people and having very open and honest conversations to try and learn and nip things in the bud. And that's what really I've been doing that for about 18 months now.
Yeah, no, definitely. And I think, you know, you have to see that any complaint is a learning opportunity, isn't it? You know, it's really important to be open and honest and transparent, but it's also important to make sure you learn. And you often find that you get loads of rich information. Somebody might complain about one thing, but actually they tell you their lived experience of what happened when they came, in our case, to A&E. And, you know, you can learn all sorts of things. Actually, you just, when you live and breathe the department, you don't always see things. So, you know, simple things that we even had from our patient engagement bed was that people were desperate to charge their phones. But of course, when you're not sitting in A&E as a patient, you don't necessarily think, oh, there's no way to charge your phone. And it's those kind of, that rich information that can make a huge difference, something, you know, easy to store.
Yeah.
So it's really important that we listen and have feedback.
That's great. Louise?
Thank you. Really interesting. The trauma-informed approach is becoming more and more prominent, isn't it? And it's quite a concept. I think it's quite a shift. I don't think our medical students yet have taught about it. I suppose in a nutshell, what do you think trauma-informed approach is what you do means to you and your staff? And do you think that that approach has benefits for staff as well as the patients?
Yeah, I do, and I think if you look at the 6 principles, which I might forget, of trauma-informed kind of nursing or care, and it's basically what you should be doing anyway. It's what is good care. It's about listening, it's about giving somebody choice, it's about treating them as an individual. And so it's all the things that really, as good health practitioners, we should be doing. So it's nothing really hugely new, but it's just an acceptance of the fact that when people come in, the way they behave or the way they react to things may be because of some trauma that they've experienced. And so it's only about that holistic approach that we learned about when I trained, which is a long time ago now. But it's just about acknowledging that and accepting that, you know, not everyone's going to behave as you do because not everyone's had the experience you have. So it's just really reframing what good human nature should be when you read about it. But it's just giving people that additional understanding that different things can trigger different people. So I think it's just important to...
What are the benefits to the staff, do you think?
I think the benefits to the staff are obviously, you know, we have a diverse staff group and they can also experience trauma and have those kind of, you know, things that trigger their anxiety or that make them feel unsafe. So it's about their psychological safety as well. I think it gives them a basis to look at and it gives them more understanding and more education. The more knowledge we have, that only ever improves what we do.
And so I was just checking, because I know from sitting in meetings at West Yorkshire level, that the whole concept really is like you described of trauma-informed systems is really important. And I know that when sort of gives the presentation and talks about how the work is slowly spreading across all of West Yorkshire, but she speaks very highly of how receptive we have been in Bradford and how we've taken it on board. But part of their aspiration is that everybody signs up to the charter. Have we done that as a board? I don't think we have we? We've never brought it here. There's a readiness assessment checklist. Because part of the West Yorkshire ambition is that by 2030, the whole system will be much more geared up receptive to dealing with the manifestations of trauma, you know, domestic abuse or whatever it is. And it might be something that we can bring to the board.
Yeah, that'd be really, really good.
Yeah.
Should we take that as an action then?
Yeah, I'll work with them on that.
Yeah, okay, and then bring it back to the board when you're ready. Yeah, okay, that's great, thanks Mel. All right, anything else?
Can I just ask a wider question? So brilliant story, really enjoyed the video, and Rebecca was beyond that, it was brilliant. I was like, wow, a little bit starstruck actually.
Did you try and practice that?
Oh, well, we that's I suppose my question is around the broader refreshing of knowledge. So how, you know, medicine's updating all the time and care's updating all the time. How do you keep your area updated on all that knowledge? And how do you train people to want to know and to move on?
I think a lot of it in the past was shared when NICE guidelines update and when things update, we shared in team meetings, we shared out in emails. But we've realised that we need to do more than that. And so which is why we've started this now refresher triage training. But it's not just about triage, it's about your whole assessment, your team leading. And obviously, we've got a whole MDT approach to it, so we've got cardiology involved, we've got surgery involved, and Lucy's building that now. In fact, she won award at the Nursing Excellence Day yesterday. So she's built a brand new assessment package for new triage, which is a 2-day course with Sims, interactive training, and yet again, that's a whole MDT approach with different specialities. And she's just nearly finished the refresher course, which will start to be delivered. And I think that is the key really, because then everything that's new can be brought into that, and it's not death by PowerPoint. It's a day of interactive discussions, case discussions where things have gone well, case discussions where things haven't gone so well. So we can really bring in that rich learning. I think that's really important.
That's absolutely great, thank you. So thank you for coming and sharing your story. Thank Rebecca as well.
Yeah, that's it.
and the whole team. It's been a pleasure to meet with you.
Thanks, Anthony.
Thank you.
Bye.
Okay, so as you can see, we're starting the meeting off by talking about patient care. So under this category, I'm going to hand over to Louise now for quality.
Yeah, thank you. So you've had the reports. What I'm going to do, I found it helpful for myself as well to kind of talk across the two papers because they do kind of speak to each other, if that's all right. And in sort of topic areas. So I'm going to start off with maternity and neonatal topics. So in February, there was nothing to escalate to the board, by the way, in either academies. But there was a theme, and there has been an ongoing theme, and we've discussed it here about staffing levels, particularly in maternity or in neonatal, and concerns that staff raise about safe staffing levels. Still a priority in the April academy. There was discussion about actions to mitigate against this, so it's daily huddles around staffing. I guess the impact of that, apart from being on staff and those people that are trying to organise rota gaps, is that there is some impact on one-to-one care. There is some impact, although not as much as you might think, in terms of diverting women to other care providers. I suppose there potentially could be, this is something that the team are very aware of, that this might impact on the experience of parents. The let's just get this right, the questionnaire, the acronym correct, the maternity CQC results. So typically we were above average on 5, below average on 5, and some of the 59% response rate, higher than that, better response rate, about 60% of women were Asian or Asian British. So the concerns were potentially linked to some of those things that have just been raised, women potentially not feeling that there was always staff around for them, even though that I know that our colleagues in maternity services are doing a great deal to ensure that that doesn't happen, and that they're very strict and conservative in the way that they report one-to-one care. I just wanted to bring that to you. There was something that was reported in the it was February, but it was the March paper, which was potentially about medication incidents in maternity and neonatal that was raised. And Karen, I think you wanted to speak to that, because then it came back to the last academy and it wasn't an issue.
Yeah, so I think somebody made a comment around neonatal medications that wasn't the matron for that area, so I went back to the matron for that area, and he explained that something had been taken out of context, so they're not an outlier for medicines errors.
Okay, thank you. Okay, the maternity neonatal statistics that we need to report, stillbirths, neonatal deaths and so on, they're across the two papers that you'll see. There's nothing there in the numbers that are presented that suggest any spikes or any issues that we need to be concerned about. That doesn't mean to say that every case where there's a neonatal death or a stillbirth isn't sad, and they're all, investigated, and obviously we spend a lot of time thinking about those and looking at those figures every time, and there's a lot of learning that is reflected from each of the cases presented at the academies. Something really nice, I think, was that visiting times were extended during Ramadan and Eid, thinking about families being able to break the fast together or share food in the evening, and I think that might be extended potentially.
I think maternity are keen to look at extending. The rest of the adult areas not as keen.
Okay.
What we're going to do is we're going to get some data, sample staff, but we will definitely be adopting more open visiting on bank holidays going forwards, and celebration events.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Thank you. We've received the final NHSE report giving good assurance on neonatal services, and so in general I think the Academy feels that we get a good level of assurance from the maternity and neonatal services. Patient safety incidents will still in transition to PSER. there is, I'm not sure if there is now at this point any more legacy SIs, but that was reducing. As of the April meeting, there was 8 ongoing investigations. There had been one never event, which was radiotherapy, I think, on the wrong kidney, but that had never, that was opened and closed in the actually reporting period. And Judith kind of reported how that PSERF approach had helped them with that to actually move things on really quickly, and the learning from that also to be received quickly. So again, assurance on how serious incidents are reported, monitored, and learning from them. High level risks, some risks have been increased. You'll all know this because you'll see the high level risk register. Histopathology in particular is something of concern. But the histo improvement programme has begun, so the QPSA will be keeping oversight of that. In terms of questions were asked about when we'll start to see the improvements, and the person that's leading that was very honest to say this is a long-term issue. There's a number of factors. Histopathology is understaffed across, nationally understaffed. We have some particular issues at Bradford. But assurance that now we have this histo improvement programme and good oversight of that. I think Saj sits to my right, the aseptic unit in pharmacy is still an outstanding.
That's right. Yeah, so there's 2 elements to this. So we have got so there's an overall wire programme for aseptics, and part of that we have got an allocated amount of capital. But prior to that coming in, we've got a mobile unit that has been delivered to the St Luke's site. That is currently in its commissioning phase. At the point it becomes commissioned, we will be able to reduce the risk on the risk register. There was an issue initially with some leakage of rainwater into the building. That's been rectified, and now the isolators are currently undergoing testing. So as soon as that's complete, we'll be able to downgrade that risk.
Okay, that's great. All right. Yep. Okay. Any Ray?
So if I may just add a little bit of detail to the pathology we talked about. So as Louis said, there's a lot of work ongoing to try and help with improving our histopathology services. Looking back from comparing where we are now to 2019, we've seen about 30% increase in numbers of specimens coming to the service, and it's not just numbers of specimens. The requirements now to make a particular diagnosis often involve a lot more work on each individual specimen. So it's absolute number, but also complexity of the work that needs to be done on the specimen. So we know that the service is under-resourced. It's not a quick fix, particularly because nationally, as Louisa said, there's a real shortage of experienced consultant histopathologists out there. And we're having to rely on locums, banks, etc., and outsourcing work as well. There was particularly concern around breast histopathology, and we're addressing that. So weekly now we have an oversight group which both Saj and I attend, looking at specifically breast histopathology, looking at exactly how many cases we've got outstanding, what any time delays and anything we can do to mitigate speeding up that pathway. So there's a lot of, quite rightly, a lot of work going into that service because it's such a critical service for time cancer pathways.
Yeah. Okay, that's really helpful. Thanks, Ray. Karen.
Just some more detail around the legacy incident. So we've transitioned from our DATEX to in-phase for how we record and manage risks and incidents. The risk with that is that stuff gets left in the old system and then gets forgotten about because, so we've done a big look back exercise and it's looked at 3 things. So the first thing it's looked at is any open SI actions, and we've gone back 5 years. There were 45, they've all now been closed apart from ones that are relating to estates that are waiting on some capital bills that are ongoing at this moment in time. We then look back at any open incidents, and in particular focusing on any over 60 days, and there were several thousand which are now closed, so there are no legacy incidents anymore on the old system. And then we look at SIs as well. So there will still be legacy SIs that were on the old system, because they're still being investigated and we have that sort of 6 months window. And we know that we're not always investigating in 6 months, it's sometimes taking a bit longer. So those are the 3 things that have been done. For sort of assurance on that, we have a weekly quality of care meeting where we are keeping an eye on the number of incidents of 30 days, 60 days, so that if these numbers do start to rise, we can nip it in the bud and take immediate action.
Okay, all right, so for assurance, could you come back at the next public meeting and just give us an update on that, in terms of how we're progressing? Okay, that's great, Karen. Any questions for Louise? Okay.
Well, it's a question for Karen on maternity staffing levels.
Yeah.
So that number, it looks like fully established bar 7 whole down equivalents, seems incredibly small.
Yes, so there's a couple of things at play here. So one is, so from an established point of view, we've got a small number of vacancies, but we know that the training requirement now for maternity far outstrips the percentage that is within the establishment when we work out the figures. The other element is our sickness absence rate is higher than where it would want to be. So it was, I think it was running about 8-9%. So again, that is higher as well. And we've got some overseas midwives that have started that are still not yet able to practice on their own. So they are within those numbers as well. So staffing is improving in that area, and we're seeing that the main impact is probably the birth centre, which is where our lower risk women go. And that has been closed to move those staff to the labour ward, which is alongside, so they join with the corridor. And so I would say that the experience of women who were expecting a low risk birth in a low risk environment is probably impacted, and I think Sarah alluded to that as well. We know one-to-one care in labour, I think it's around just below the 90% mark. It could drop to about 81-82%, so we know that's improving as well.
Okay. I think there's also an impact of midwives having to scrub in the theatre as well, so there's some knock-on effects.
Yeah.
For them.
I mean, I know that traditionally there's always a higher rate of maternity leave as well in that particular cohort of our colleagues. But my next question would be, what are we doing about staff sickness then?
So I've already discussed this with Renee as our new people and purpose officer, because I think we need to support the managers that are managing the sickness in a different way. Because I think when a ward manager or a nurse is very busy, although it is important, it's maybe not the first thing that they get around to doing. So we need to really tighten up on our policy, making sure that we're addressing sickness absence with individuals. I think we also then need to understand why people are off sick, and there's a wide variety of reasons, and see how we can support people best with quick and easy access to occupational health, which we know for a routine occupational health appointment at the moment is delayed, so that's not helpful either. And we have got in force the pastoral midwives and a freedom to speak up guardian in maternity as well, that we're offering that additional support to staff as well.
Thank you.
All right, that's great. Any other questions or comments? Greg?
Sorry, Chair, it's about this item, but something slightly separate. So just in case there's any confusion just from the agendas. So I just noted the Guardian Safe Working Hours quarterly report was attached to this section. So that's normally reported actually through the People Academy.
Yeah.
I know the report's in the packet of papers, so I'm happy to say something about that or to answer any questions about that if anybody's got any.
Just going to bring you in on that.
Okay.
So I'm used to a system where Freedom to Speak Up and Guardian Safe Working Hours would actually report direct to the board rather than through Academy, and I just think the way we positioned it on our previous public minutes, where public papers, where it was, I think it was Freedom to Speak Up last month, and he was right at the back of the annex. It's just not very helpful for the public to be able to see and reflect. So that's why the Guardian of Safe Working Hours, I've pulled the paper forward, so it's more in our eye line to read if you're not on that academy. And obviously if there's any comments raised here to ask them. If the Guardian would like to come and present to the board on a half a yearly basis, then very welcome, would accept that. So the report is there, if anybody's got any questions for Karen.
Similarly, so I know Sue Franklin would want the opportunity to speak to the board. So if we could take that as an action, that would be really good.
Yeah, that'd be great. Okay.
Would you like to say just literally 1 minute, just for some people may not be familiar with the report. So as I said, it's normally discussed every quarter through the People Academy. But for those not familiar, so the Guardian Safe Working Hours came out of the changes to the 2016 junior doctor contract. Of course, there were concerns about would that disadvantage junior doctors and end up making them work more hours and not actually recognised from a paid position. So Guardian was created from that. Our Guardian is Jo Glaspidine. She's a consultant in acute maternal medicine and also an HIV expert as well. She's been in that post, I think, for about 2.5, 3 years now. So quite experienced in the post. So we have a quarterly report and we have an annual summary report as well. For quarter 4, which is the most current reporting period, there were 41 exception reports altogether, and just for clarity, exception reports are put forward by trainees initially through their educational supervisor, and they offer any either educational opportunity because of pressures of work or for additional hours worked over and above their contracted hours. Yeah. So there were 41 exception reports through quarter 4. That's probably about an average number of exception reports. I think there were probably about 5 or 6 less the previous quarter, but it's clearly. They were all due to additional hours work. So the 41 exception reports generated 41.75 additional hours. So not a huge amount of additional hours worked. In addition, each trainee has the option, if they're submitting an exception report, of flagging immediate patient safety concern, and 2 of those were flagged as immediate safety concerns. They were both from the same trainee, both related to having to stay behind after their shift to help care for a patient who was very unwell. Any safety incident flag which raised is specifically investigated by Jo. And discussions are had with that individual trainee about circumstances. So I think safety really is in the eye of the beholder to an extent. So if somebody considers them staying behind that was unsafe, then they have the option of flagging that. But we look at an individual flag to see if there are any service issues that we can actually sort out. Yeah. Over and above what that trainee has experienced. All the detail in there, it talks about numbers of locum shifts and gaps in rotas that we have to cover on a frequent basis. And I think I'm just trying to find the number, but it goes into thousands of shifts in each quarter that we have to go out to banking agency for, which is obviously hugely expensive. And I think speaks to the fact that even though, so we have gaps in our rota establishment in terms of numbers of junior doctors allocated, but those gaps are all filled actually by locally employed doctors and post-foundation fellows. So in theory we don't have any gaps, and yet still we actually do have gaps, and it's a constant thing said that we feel we are under doctors in Bradford because we are incredibly busy trust with high acuity resource foundation members. But in terms of junior doctors allocated, we get what the league is able to provide to us. So we get what we're given. We try and support more when offered, but we do have a pressure junior doctor workers.
And obviously this is the first report I've seen. So in terms of trend, is it getting worse or?
No, it's not. It's things have probably stabilised. So during the pandemic period of 2.5 years, we saw a a real reduction in numbers of exception reports because I think everyone knew it was just such a difficult time to put hands to the budget, so that was understandable and everyone saw that. We've probably stabilised back towards baseline now. We're careful not to congratulate ourselves in having to a fairly low number actually, because we want to know if junior doctors feel that they are having to work beyond what they're contracted for, because it's not good for their well-being. So we do encourage reporting, so we, it's part of junior doctor induction, the process and the encouragement to do that. Jo meets the junior doctor regularly, she goes to the junior doctor forum, I've been to junior doctor forum as well. And there's little videos on the intranet in terms of how to report for junior doctors and also how to act on that report for educational supervisors. So we do try and promote reporting as much as we can so we learn from it. And we discuss the paper actually at every LNC meeting as well, and the junior doctor representation in the LNC meeting, so we discuss it frequently.
Good, that's excellent. Thank you. Thanks a lot, Dr. Any questions, comments? Okay, all right, thank you. Sarah, welcome.
Thank you.
All right, can we hand over to you then?
Yeah, I don't think we'll need a presentation today actually, because it's quite a quick update.
Okay.
So the paper bundle that you've had this time relates to activity from February and March. Both of those papers were received by Quality and Patient Safety Academies, and I don't think there's anything escalated. We can draw anything out that required escalation to board level. So pretty low harms actually over the last of those 2 reporting months, which obviously is really positive. But obviously we just continue to monitor that on a monthly basis. And just 2 things that I've drawn out this time, just to share with you. Firstly is around the internal audit report of the maternity CQC improvement plan, which we got back a rating of significant assurance. The thing that kept us down slightly was just that there was one minor recommendation regarding extension completion dates. Now, when we looked at that, we're not really sure what we could have done much differently, because a lot of those actions were around things like relying on building work or people being appointed into post. So there wasn't anything really that could have been done in a shortened time frame, so they were extended as a result of that. But other than that, I think it just really reflects the hard work, particularly that Carly, the head of the monitoring and maintaining that improvement plan. So we were very pleased with that. And then the only other thing just to draw out this time was that the Perinatal Mortality Review quarterly report was presented to Quality and Patient Safety Academy, and that is one of the requirements for Maternity Incentive Scheme Safety Action 1. And we present that, as I said, quarterly. And the report this time demonstrates that we have, we're either met already or we are on a good trajectory to meet the required standard within the required time frame. So we don't have any concerns or anything to escalate there. Since I wrote the report, the Maternity Incentive Scheme Year 6 has now been published. What we took the decisions we've done every year, well, we had that little bit of hiatus just to continue with the monitoring process that we have done, and actually that's proved to be absolutely right. So there's not been any breaks in reporting whatsoever. So all these are accounted for. The report did include just a number of improvement actions that were identified. Now, there wasn't anything that was contributory to the deaths of these babies, but were general improvements that we could make with care to some of the mums. So things around documentation of previous pregnancies and some issues with carbon monoxide monitoring and what happens when we have a faulty piece of equipment. How do we make sure that woman is flagged so that next time that happens in a timely manner? So relatively minor things, but they have been fed back to the relevant teams for action. And unless you've drawn anything else out from the reports, that's it, which feels quite unusual to be so
It's great.
so quick.
Thanks, Karen.
So just since the papers have been written, we've just had a concern raised around the number of hours that our maternity neonatal voices partnership have. So we currently share a job share between ourselves and AirDay, and I think it equates to we have about 3 hours a week, and the national recommendation is 3 days. So this is commissioned by the ICD. So Sarah and I are going to meet with the MNDP and see how we can take this forward, because they are essential to our because they are parts of our assurance, our governance, bringing in the voice of the women. And in the past, we've had very, very good, healthy relationships with the MNDP.
Right, okay. So if we've got 3 hours, how much has AirDay got?
3.
Yeah. Okay. Okay. So you can take that up?
No, it's just a question, because I know that we did have quite a lot of input from them, and good level of engagement.
Yeah.
Was that because we had more time then? Is it reduced?
I think it was the positioning of those people, Mel last time, so one of them worked within Bradford doulas, so actually there was a crossover involved that really enabled them to participate, have those hats, have those hats on a lot of the time.
Yeah, understood.
Right, okay. Any other questions for Sarah and points to raise? That's brilliant, okay, thank you very much.
Okay, I'll go back to the next time this is group.
All right, nice to see you. Okay, so we're running slightly early. We're expecting Rosie at 10:25, so maybe, unless she's there. Oh, she is there.
She's going to be a little early, so.
Right, okay.
Rosie's
Yeah.
here. Hello.
Hi, Rosie.
Hello.
Yeah, nice to see you again. So thank you for joining us today. So Ray, do you want to introduce?
Yeah, I'd love to, great honour to. So, obviously this is our standing item that we have on board meeting, looking at research that we do in the trust, and I think one of the common questions we get is, well, so what does research mean? What difference does it make to our patients, to our communities? So there's a detailed document, of course, to the board in a bundle of papers, which I think speaks a lot to that question. So much of the research that we do is really, really patient focused. Lots of new and exciting developments on there. Lots of new grant success. I just point out as well that in quarter three, we recruited about 17,500 patients to NIHR portfolio studies, which is the fifth highest recruiter in the whole of NIHR in the whole of the country, and more than any of our partners in Wyatt actually. So a fantastic achievement. We've got a world-class research facility here with world-class researchers, and those are certainly amongst those. And what we try and do every so often is to have, rather than just a paper, a basis paper, it's good to have actually one of those people come to talk to us, so you can actually see those amazing people who are behind all this, and Rosie making this come to talk to us today. I think, Rosie, you've been before, it was about 2 years ago, 2.5 years ago?
Can't remember, no idea. I think so. It might have been online last time.
Yeah, I think it probably was, but it was just, it's still doing COVID, I think. So Rosie is the director of Born Bradford, and Born Bradford, I suppose, is the study which really launched the IHR into its, stellar course that it's now since then. So I won't obviously steal Rosie's thunder, but so 13,500 children and their parents were recruited to study over a 3-year period between 2007 and 2010, and they've been followed up ever since in an enormous cohort, seeing what happened to them. And as I say, it's what really, I suppose, launched the BIHR to what it is today. Rosie was telling me earlier she's been in her current role since 2012, so more than 10 years now, and joined the IHR. So, so she's a fantastic individual, and I'll hand over to Rosie just to talk. Her enthusiasm, I know, will because it is boundless. So, and Rosie did say, we've got a lot of new faces around here, so is it okay if we just tell Rosie who we are and then she knows who we're talking about?
Yeah,
Great.
Of course, Rosie. So obviously you know Ray.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, hi Rosie, so Mark Hindmarsh, I'm the new Director of Strategy.
great. Well, we are.
I return to being costume.
Yeah.
I'm Brian Makin, the new Non-Executive Director.
Great. Hello.
Hi Rosie, I'm Sajad, the Chief Operating Officer and Deputy Chief Executive.
Louise Bryant, I'm a non-exec director from University of Leeds.
Karen Walker, another non-executive.
Karen Achievement.
Yes, hello, hello.
I'm just doing Mel's business.
What's your name?
Tabitha, hi, Tabitha. Julia Avenue, London non-execs.
Great. You too.
Those are Paul Rice, and she did it.
Yes.
I'm Katie, Corporate Governance Manager.
Great.
Laura Parsons, Board Secretary.
Great.
Sarah, new
Yes,
chair.
of course, well, yes.
Hi, and I'm Renee Bullock, the new Chief People and Purpose Officer.
Brilliant. Okay, well, I hope there's not a test at the end of this. Rubbish. So, Ray did give me a little warning, no death by PowerPoint, right? And I was thinking of maybe scrapping the slides, but actually, since you've got them on, I've got some nice images that I think really bring to life the stuff that we're doing. So, are you going to be my Chris Whitty next slide, please? So, we'll just keep on this one to start. So Barn Bradford is set up fundamentally to try and stop people coming into hospital. Really, we are a preventive research programme, and our aim is to make families living in Bradford healthier and happier. Now, Bradford is an amazing city to live and work, and I always, as you can tell, I'm not actually from Bradford originally, but another 4 years, I believe, I'll be you've got to reach 25 years, I believe. But I always start by saying what an amazing place it is to live and work, but we do have health challenges, as we all know round the table here. Now, one of the key things that we're trying to address is health inequality. So that first slide I've got up here just demonstrates that just by travelling 10 miles from Manningham, just in our backyard here, through to Ilkley, there is a 10-year gap in life expectancy. And that's not fair, so we need to do something about it, and that's really what Barn Bradford is all about. So to move on to the next slide. So the other thing that we're trying to tackle is it's not just about health inequalities. We've got really entrenched spatial inequalities within Bradford as well. And again, this is not unique to Bradford. This is every major city that we have in the UK. So the maps that you can see there are maps of Bradford district, and we've got pollution map there in the top right, so the red levels of the areas where it's really highly polluted. We've got noise levels from traffic, we've got lack of green space. And if you were to overlay all of those indicators with a map of deprivation across Bradford, we'd find almost like a perfect match. So it's not fair. And I think for families living in Bradford, we really have to be doing something to really help them overcome the sort of triple whammy of risk factors that they have for health and well-being. So move on to the next slide. So our strapline for Barn Bradford is research that changes the city. So we, as Ray said, we set up in 2007, and the aim was really to shine a light on what was happening in Bradford. At the time, we had really high levels of child mortality and really high levels of ill health. And we really wanted to do something useful that would help the city respond to those challenges. So we set up our breath cohort study, and this is like a really powerful research tool to try and understand and disentangle the types of factors that are important for health and well-being. But we have a number of aims within Barn Bradford. So the first is to figure out what's going on, to describe what's going on, and figure out, where we should be sort of targeting our focus and attention. But we're not a dusty shelf academic research project. So I always like to, we are here to serve our stakeholders and our communities. So we use the learning to develop new services, new initiatives, to input into new policies that we can work with our partners to get implemented across Bradford. Third, we aim to provide a model for translation of evidence into practice. Now, this is quite difficult to do. Evidence building can take a long time, but I think the unique factor we have is being based within an NHS hospital trust. Now, we are the only research programme of its type based within the NHS,
And I credit that with the amount of success that we have had with our city stakeholders in order to actually affect change. And that includes, we work really closely with our partners in the hospital and the trust, but also the wider ICBs, and also, very importantly, the local authority, because a lot of the preventive type of work that we need investment into comes from local authority budgets rather than hospital budgets. And the final thing that we're going to do is to sort of increase research capacity within Bradford. And I believe that when John Bright started BIHR, it was just John and I as part-time secretary. And now, as you can see, we have a bespoke building that we add to every few years. There's a team of over 250 researchers in BIHR, and actually born in Bradford, a team of over 100. So next slide, please. So here we are. And I just wanted to include this because I think we are a very large research programme and internationally recognised, and I do wonder whether sometimes we're not recognised as much within the hospital as we could be. And I think that was like one of my messages today is like, not to blow our own trumpet, but we are doing amazing work. We have researchers coming from around the globe to come and work with us. We have a huge team. And I think it's how can we help the hospital to sort of sell the good news story about what we're doing a bit more. So I just wanted to put that in to say hello to everybody. And that's probably about half of our team that we took at our sort of picnic last year. Next slide, please. Okay, so I always just like to introduce the photos of the families that are involved in our study. They are the life force of what we do. We wouldn't be able to do anything without the families that take part. Every year we have a photo shoot where we invite twins into the BIHR. Our colleagues hate it because they never get any work done because there's like kids running about everywhere. But what we do is that we follow up the health and well-being. So we started as this cohort of 12,500 families, and that was, we set up stall at the BRI between 2007 and 2011. We got 80% of women who were coming in for a routine GTT test into the study, and that's unheard of. That has not happened anywhere else in the UK. So we did really well. And we've been following up the health and well-being of those kids ever since. Next slide. What I love about working on a cohort study, it's like being in a time machine. 10 years have passed, and where we started looking at children's health and birth outcomes, now we're dealing with adolescents. So how we follow our families up is a lot of bespoke visits where we speak to subsamples and ask them a lot of information about how their life circumstances and how they're doing. But one of the key successes for us has been linking to routinely collected data. So that's data that we collect within the hospital, but also data that we collect across GP settings as well. And that's made us a very efficient and effective way of following up our families. Because as you can imagine, to speak to all 12,500 families every year would take a lot of staff resource. Next slide. Okay, so I'll just move us on now. So I often where we have really massively expanded since we started in 2012. And what we've been trying to do is to sort of layer up a data infrastructure across the city to really make Bradford a really excellent place to come if you want to find out what works to improve health and well-being. So we call this our City of Research data infrastructure. So we have now 3 BID cohorts. We have the original BID cohort, but we also have BIDS, which is one based aligned to the Better Start project in Bradford, and also routine data linkage cohort called BID for All. That is integrated into maternity care, where we have midwives who consent women to be part of the project for research purposes. That model has now spread out across the UK, so there's about 14 different sites now who've been learning from our approach and have been implementing that in their own area. So it's a big success and a good point of learning for us. We have about 60,000 Bradfordians and counting, more every day, who are actively taking part in our studies. But underpinning everything that we do, we have this connected Bradford dataset, which is a really rich dataset that links pseudo-anonymised routine data from lots of different service providers across Bradford. Next slide, please. So I often get asked, right, put your money where your mouth is. Actually, can you change a city? How have we made things better in Bradford? The findings and the work that we've been doing in Bradford, we have helped to bring over £100 million of investment into preventive interventions aimed at improving the health of the population. There's just some examples of some of the projects we've been working on up on the screen. So We Better Start Bradford was a £50 million investment from the big lottery aimed at improving outcomes for children aged 0 to 3. We're part of the Join Us Move Play, which is a £15 million funded implementation programme from Sport England. More recently, Love It or Hate It, Breathe Better Bradford, which is the clean air zone that's been put into place in Bradford. I won't take a straw poll, but really to try and what we've been trying to do is to use the evidence we collect to really bring that investment into the city so that we can see a positive change. Next slide. And it's not just the sort of traditional things that we've been involved with. Those of you who will be as proud, Bradfordians will be as proud as I am about City of Culture, which is going to be coming to Bradford next year. The Born in Bradford Research Programme was mentioned by the judges as one of the reasons why this programme is coming to Bradford, because what we can do is help to identify, well, what difference does this investment in arts and culture have on the health, aspirations, and life chances of our community. So we're very, very excited. So next slide, I promise I don't have that much more. Okay, so key priorities for us over the next year. So I've got two sort of big ticket items, areas of work that we're going to be involved with. The first is our Age of Wonder project. So this is a 7-year project that's funded by the Wellcome Trust. And it's going to be exploring that very turbulent period of growing up from adolescence into young adulthood. So we know that this is a time in our life where healthy life trajectories are set. We pick up habits that are maybe good for health or bad for health. And my goodness, what a time to be going through that really tumultuous journey with all the shocks that we've had from COVID and cost of living. So the aim with Age of Wonder is actually to upscale our big cohorts. We want to give every young person in Bradford the opportunity to be part of this study. So we'll be recruiting up to 30,000 young people over the next few years. We're already working with 30 out of the 38 secondary schools in the district, and we're collecting information that is co-produced with young people, so it's based on their priorities. And we're also collecting as much as we can get, heights and weights and getting bloods and, whatever the young people are going to be happy with us collecting. This information we're able to feed back in sort of nearly real time to the schools as well, so that they can see about the health of their populations. Some really interesting findings coming out from the earlier data collection waves about prevalence of eating disorders and about the amount of time young people are spending on social media. And schools can use that to help think about that service provision and also sort of break down the silos that we often have within schools between health and education as well. So this is a big deal for us. And then the next big deal, which I'm really excited about, so next slide please, is around healthy urban places. So my particular passion within the Born in Bradford Research Programme, which is a very big research programme, is about how we can harness the power of the places in which we live as tools to improve population health. And this is things like making sure that we have clean air, safe places to play, we have access to services and education, we have communities that are easy to navigate and opportunities in arts and culture. And so a very sort of holistic view of how the places in which we live can influence our health. We have been successfully awarded Healthy Urban Places project. We were one of only 4 places to be awarded. This is a very prestigious award. We compete with universities across the UK for this funding. We were one of 4 that to be awarded with a particular focus on healthy urban places. So we're going to be working very closely with the local authority we're going to be looking at everything from that massive £2 billion investment into the Southern Gateway to how can we make new developments and housing developments better for families to live in. So this will be a big piece of work that we're going to be working on over the next 4 years. I think I've got one more slide. And that was it. So this was just as a reminder. So the vision, our vision and the vision of our team is to promote a healthier, fairer future for children and families. And if you want to help us with that, we'll be delighted to work with you. Thank you very much.
That was brilliant, Rosie. Thank you. The passion and enthusiasm comes across. I must say that, because obviously I'm new here.
Yes.
And you have kept your research hidden under a bushel, you know, because you're doing amazing work and it's not known in the neighbouring areas, because I've only come up from South Yorkshire.
Yeah.
So I think you're right, we really do need to promote the work that's going on.
I mean, I think what I would say is, we're an internationally recognised research programme. We are entirely grant funded, so we bring in all the money to sustain this big team, and we're also a contributor to the hospital as well. So sometimes I think we do feel a bit about square peg in a round hole, and it's like how can we feel a bit more integrated potentially? Yeah, absolutely. Did you want to respond on that, Mel?
I did. So it's a question about how do you think we can be more integrated?
Yeah, I feel like I think it's about making sure that the other directorates and the teams, they know about us a bit more. I feel like, we've sort of forgotten about it sometimes, I think. So it's just about feeling that we are part of the team, and that maybe we can have forums to communicate the work that we do a bit more effectively.
Okay, so predominantly a kind of a telling, a comms thing. Is there anything else that we can do?
Well, I think there's other things which I think possibly a bit harder to address. So I know that some of the challenges that we have are things which are really difficult to change, things like procurement and working within HR. You know, so there's some things, because we just don't quite fit into a traditional hospital model. So I think we are trying to work on those things, but I think there's still some work that we can do to try and just smooth things a little bit with those functions.
Okay, let's pick that up outside of the meeting. Right, so we've got Sophia, who is online, who wants to come in with a question.
Thanks, Sarah, and thanks for the presentation, Rosie. And I do echo what everyone else has said in terms of amazing work going on the research. I guess I just had a broader question in terms of, from all the initiatives and the aspirations that you've got from the work that you do you have any examples of the impact from the research and all the funding and the grants and the money which has been spent across whilst working with the stakeholders, and also in terms of that impact, how do you communicate and share that to the broader community?
Yeah, I think that the couple of examples, I think, which are really nice examples of how we've worked with partners, would be around the work we've done around green infrastructure and green spaces in the city, but also around pollution and breathing cleaner air. So as a direct result of the Better Start initiative, which was focused on 3 of the most deprived wards around the city, we got funding for capital improvements. So there's 40 refurbished green spaces, pocket parks, safe places for families with young children to go and play. I think another key one for us is about clean air. So Bradford was directed by the government to implement a clean air zone to improve pollution. And at the time we got the ministerial direction, it was a bit, they're politically are very difficult things to get right. We were able to work with the council. We were able to give them the evidence that showed the impact pollution is having on children's health in Bradford, to really, I always say, like, squeeze the pips out of what we were able to do with that clean air zone. It was a much more ambitious clean air zone than it would have been if Born in Bradford hadn't been involved. And we got the maximum amount of money that we could from the government to implement it. We are evaluating the impact of the clean air zone and just using information actually from the hospital, looking at accident and emergency admissions on respiratory and cardiovascular illnesses. And there was a nice, it's too early for me to share the findings, but we can show a really nice story about what's happening to the health of the population in Bradford and also the pollution. So I think those are 2 key examples for me. There's lots of others, but I don't want to keep you here all day, so
well, we've got lots of questions. So what I'm going to do, if it's all right, we can note the questions down. If we gather the questions and then come back to you, if that's all right. So we'll start with Julie.
So I'm guessing some of those things you've talked about, we won't see the kind of outcomes from till people are 70 or 80, and some of the kind of difference in life expectancy, the projects you're doing will make that difference, or actually what they might do is offset some of the gap that might be growing bigger, so we've got to kind of have faith in that. Great to see your presentation with all those children in. And great to kind of see, I loved how you linked it to the kind of hospital and saying actually preventing people from coming in hospital, and I think that's really important for us to understand. Great, you're getting all that money into Bradford. What about the 8 schools? So you talked about 30 and there's 38. Why haven't we got 38?
Good question. Right.
Help. That's my question, yeah.
Mark?
Yeah, thanks, Sarah. So, yeah, a couple of things for me. So, one is, I've got health inequalities in my portfolio. It would be really helpful to be better connected on that, to learn from the work that you've done in that space that we can take forward in the hospital trust. Having been in Bradford a couple of years ago, sort of point to now, the connected Bradford data set, I understand in broad terms, like actually the opportunity that gives us to collaborate better. And I know, I don't colleagues around the table, but certainly my perspective is, when we're doing transformation improvement work, it's never just about the hospital. It's about thinking about the population at large, about our place in society. What you have there is a unique way of pulling data sets together so we understand better the impact of our decisions, our judgment calls, our services on people in the population, and the implications that can have in other parts of the system, and vice versa as well, actually. So, I'd be really keen to pick up a conversation with you, and I'm sure Paul will be in that as well, to see what we can do better together on that thing. And then just on the final point, to just pick up what Mel was saying about better connections, let's have a conversation about better connections, And I've got the transformation team under me in the organisation. Your team are out there trying to change things too. So there must be an opportunity in there to align better, link up better, and join up. And we should
Great.
Cup of coffee and work through some of it.
That's great, Mark. Thank you. Karen?
Similar to Sarah in a way, but just wow, your energy is amazing. Love it. There's something for me about internationally recognised but locally ? And how do we get to hear about this stuff? I was thinking about place, act as one, and how that can, having assets at place, and I don't hear about any of this research. It's really important, it's plugged into the whole lot. So I sort of stumbled down building connections that really matter, because there is a lack of connection of your work into the trust, the place, and then obviously you're really well connected in Bradford. And I just wondered whether there's an opportunity for you, and the CSU to academies might not be the right title, but might be the right forum, because we hear presentations from all the great work that's going on from different areas within the trust. You're not one of them, so whether or not there's an opportunity to plug in there.
Yeah, lovely. Thank you.
And the other bit is about feedback loop, actually. So all the great work you're doing, how do you get that back into the trust to say this is why it really matters?
Peace is the answer to that. Paul?
Yeah, no, again, fantastic energy. I just wanted to reflect positively on some links that are there. There's a couple of acronyms in the supporting paper. We would not have been successful of attracting the secure data environment opportunity on behalf of the whole of Yorkshire to Bradford without the pedigree and standing of colleagues in BIHR. And the SROs for that piece of work, so we've already got a concrete link between colleagues there, colleagues in the other ICBs and that research community. The second comment, and this is still in early development, is we've already heard we had a conversation today about depth of coding, we had a conversation about shimming, we're going to have a conversation persistently about the criticality of data, insight and intelligence, what we do. And that workforce and expertise about hands teeth. So I've been having conversations with colleagues about how do we talk about talent in a way that doesn't see BIHR as, there's the longest strip of tarmac in history, because it's just over there. So how do we have that conversation? And again, Renee and I will definitely have that conversation going forward, because there is talent there. My last two comments are about the wider policy environment. It's really hard in the context of a cost of living crisis and the pandemic to think, how would we measure how worse off our community would be without this investment and this focus? Because undoubtedly, the local authority is under a huge amount of pressure currently financially. So keeping this like burning is critical. And then the last comment was really about the profile and age of wonder. I was talking on execs this morning very briefly about the fact that my middle child is 20 today. Our family plan was perfect, and so far as each of the three of them were impacted by the pandemic in a different way in terms of their transitions. One was going to be doing A levels, one GCSE, one moving from primary. The catalogue of things that are consequent on that runs deep. So this program is absolute, and I think that one's deep in a household that's got an income and a couple of good incomes. This program is absolutely vital. So all credit to Rosie and colleagues about age of wondering what that's going to do.
Yeah, totally agree. So we've got Renee and then Louise.
Yeah, I'll be quick, but it's just to say that we have circa 6,000 plus people that work here in our organisation, and the majority of those live within this community. So I think you and I engaging with that and thinking about how do they know how to access that best. But I think there's another thing we could look at is around in that engagement, how do we get them to work better with you around maybe volunteering or thinking about how they can share some of those messages, so using them as a conduit for our community. So just to say, I really support that, really excited about it, and you and I should really engage.
Great.
Okay.
Yes.
Hi Rose, good to meet you. Obviously the pictures of the children and twins are very photogenic, aren't they? So it's always cheers everybody up to see those, but I guess there's some big topics that might be less, well, photogenic is the word. So things that are really important to Bradford are, you know, maternal death. So there are differences in health inequalities there. There's a high proportion of people with learning disability in Bradford. You know, and elderly care, if we think about patient flow and some of the things that really impact on our hospital. And I know you do more than board in Bradford than BIHR, so you do elderly care and rehabilitation. So I just wondered, so that's the first question about what else are you doing that really matters to us. And then I was thinking about what you said about integrating, and this is perhaps more a question for the board than you, but in terms of governance, how are board in Bradford, the BIHR links into our governance process, you know, and the benefits of the people around the table having a greater input, you know, challenge questions about what you're doing in research. It's always good to have that external voice. So those were my question.
Okay, thank you. So I think, Rosie, you've got lots of connections and lots of conversations that are going to continue outside of the room now, but in a very quick kind of...
So just sort of final thoughts for me. First is like, we are incredibly proud to be part of Bradford Teaching Hospitals. I don't think we would have ever got to where we are without being part of this wider family. So that's the first thing to say. It's such an important relationship for us. I'm delighted to hear about the opportunities that now we can make links. I'm really, so let's make that happen and see how we can start to work a bit more closely together. I just did want to pick up on the schools. This is important for us, right? Age of Wonder schools. Yeah, we've got 8 schools that have either declined or said that they don't have any capacity this year. So any help, you know, we are going all guns blazing, and I think because this is a multi-year program, I think we'll get there in the end, but we don't want to wait until year 7 before they come in. So my team will have a list of schools that we're particularly struggling with. So if anybody has any links, that would be great. Schools are under an increasing amount of pressure as well. So this is an extra thing that they have to do, but it will help them in the long term. So it's just about making that clear, really.
Okay, all right, that's great. And we'll follow up on all the other points with you. Okay. Okay, thank you for your time, Rosie. Absolutely brilliant. Okay. Right. So now we are looking at paediatric audiology. I think, Ray, are you covering this?
I am, yes.
You're working hard today. Thanks, Rosie.
Thanks, Rosie.
Thank you.
I told you Rosie's enthusiasm is be amazing. Very good. So, paediatric audiology. So, a little bit of background to this. I'm not going to go through the entirety of the paper, but I'll just pick out some important aspects. So, the background to this is comes from Scotland, so NHS Lothians. So, in 2021, an independent review found systemic failings there, which has led to some babies and children suffering permanent hearing loss as a result of not being diagnosed early enough in childhood. And following that, the newborn hearing screening programme looked at the data from every organisation in England providing paediatric audiology services between 2018 and 2023, and found that there was quite significant variation in the rate of diagnosis of hearing impairment. And it was, well, the question was, is that warranted variation or not? So as a result of that, a national paediatric hearing improvement programme, difficult to say, was established in April 2023. And out of that came a self-assessment, which all organisations were required to submit. So we submitted that self-assessment last year, and that was reviewed by subject matter experts, in audiology to rate the level of assurance that each service provided. So as you could see from the appendix that's attached, we had a letter from NHS England that was received in December saying that there were no significant concerns for our audiology services in Bradford, and we were actually only one of two organisations that were rated as such within WIAT. And following on from that, Mel, along with all other chief executives of trust providing audiology services, received a letter from CQC, and that was, I think, in April this year, asking that we provide assurance at board level about our audiology services. And I'll just read out the sentence from the CQC, which says, whilst accreditation cannot be mandated by CQC, we strongly encourage participation in UCAS, which is UK Accreditation Services Diagnostic Accreditation Schemes, including IQIPS, and IQIPS is the Improving Quality of Physiological Services. So the CQC strong recommendation is that we do take part in the IQIPS accreditation. So the specific ask from this and to the discussion at the board is whether we have achieved IQIPS accreditation. If not, are we working towards it? How far are we on with that process? What's the timeline? And have we had any safety incidents relating to our audiology services? And for that to be discussed at the board. So in answer to those questions, we are not accredited on IQIPS, and only 23% of services nationally are. We would like to be accredited, so we would like to actively work towards accreditation. The expectation is that will take 2 years to complete, but we don't have any incidents that we are aware of any child that suffered detriment because of a failure of our audiology services. And as I said, from the letter from NHS England shows that they're not concerned in terms of significant shortfalls in our service. And a risk have been entered onto the CSU risk register because we're not IQIPS accredited, as requested by CQC. So in terms of today, it's about sharing that information with the board as requested and to discuss what the options are moving forward. The options are we could do nothing or we can work towards IQIPS accreditation. That would be the preference of our physiological services. There is a relatively modest cost attached to that. So between £4,000 for desktop exercise and up to £16,000 for full on-site visit, but that will provide assurance against national standards in terms of where we are, where we need to be and what the gap is. So that would be the preference of the service. The other thing to point out is that IQIPS relates not just to audiology, to all physiological services, including cardiorespiratory. Currently, none of our physiological services are IQIPS accredited, and whilst there's a spotlight here on audiology services, the feeling is that we should be moving to accreditation for all our services, really, particularly sort of cardiorespiratory. There is work being undertaken to get that accreditation for work at the Community Diagnostic Centre that's recently opened in March, I think it was this year, but we probably need to look at that for the wider services across the trust. So the ask today for the board is to recognise the position that NHS England recognise there are no major shortfalls in our service, and to support the fact that we feel we should move towards IQIPS accreditation, and to support the ask around that.
Okay, thanks Ray, that's great. Has anybody got any questions for Ray on that? So in terms of the accreditation, is that the only accreditation, or is that the recommended accreditation?
That's it, that's it.
That's it, so it's go for that?
Yes.
Yeah, okay. And you're supporting that direction as well?
Yes.
Soon, Ray? Yeah, okay. I mean, it's good to get the assurance that our services are good and that children aren't at harm.
Yeah, absolutely.
I mean, my personal view is for that kind of cost, it's worth progressing, you know, and working towards it.
Yeah.
Does everybody else support that view?
I mean, there's a clear ask from CQC, and I think and the danger is we're in a good position at the moment in Bradford. I think the services that aren't in such a good position in neighbouring trusts and beyond, I think they're going to have a real wake-up call in terms of the improvements they have to make. What we can't do is allow them to pass those and those get left behind from the good position we're in and become less good from the others. I think we have to keep up and stay ahead with it.
Yeah, okay, so.
Yeah, thanks, Aaron. I agree. I think the option put forward there seems like a reasonable and sensible way forward, but that just recognises the direct costs of obviously the on-site visit, but there's clearly the preparation work to get the accreditation. So do we have the personnel and the ability to undertake all of the work, or is that additional resource dependent as well?
So I think the option that's preferred, a lot of that work would be done as part of that assessment process. If we were to undertake the assessment ourselves, then there will be additional resource required internally. But I think it would be fairly minimal if we were to get IQIPS to come and do the assessment for us. It will be providing information as requested rather than us having to do a lot of work. So it would actually be a lower internal cost, although there's that external cost, it would be a lower internal resource ask if we were to try and do it ourselves. Thank you.
Okay, Louise?
Yeah, thanks. I mean, it would seem obvious that we would choose to do this, but I suppose having had the conversations that we've had about money and the waste reduction programme, and although it's not, you know, it seems short-termism, it's not to spend the money, but I suppose we always have to ask, don't we? Where's the money coming from, and is there anything else that it will impact on because of that, even though it's only small sum of money proportionately, but then we think about all the other services that aren't accredited, and so what could potentially be the knock on? Is it something that we have to do right now, or is it something that we would consider?
I think it wouldn't be, for example, spending this month. I think the move towards IQIPS accreditation and the money involved with that would be over 2 years, basically. So it's not a big immediate cost. Of course, the financial envelope is what it is, and that's largely fixed. And as Matthew quite rightly says, you know, if we spend something on one thing, there's something we can't spend on another thing. I think though we have to take a risk-based approach on decisions we made in terms of where we put our finances. Although we are in a relatively good position, I think the risk around paediatric audiology has been called out by CQC and at the NHS England level. So I think we'll probably have to respond to that and act accordingly to it, because it would seem to be a potential risk for us if we don't.
And a massive impact on the children who could come to harm on that as well. Now,
well, I was going to make that point because I think it's, you know, it's important that it's great that we've got that assurance that you know the starting point for the service is above the line. It's great to have something then to be able to assess where we might want to get to. Coming back to Louisa's point, that might require investment, and that I think is the point at which we say, can we afford to get to that level? We've got a safe service. If this process assesses you against a platinum standard that may not be affordable but may be aspirational, that's when we take the decisions in a risk balance conversation about competing priorities.
Okay, all right, so I think what you're hearing is the full support that we should be moving towards that accreditation, and as we work through it, then we take the risk balanced approach. Yeah, okay.
Thank you.
All right, great, thank you. Right, so we're running just slightly behind on time, as I hand over to Karen for people.
Thank you.
Okay.
So again, March and April meetings, on the dashboard, and the dashboard has changed format. So we looked at the new one for the first time at the end of April. In March, we saw a slight increase in retention attrition turnover for the first time since June 22. So we've had a month-on-month improvement. Only a very, very slight increase to 9.55, but then in April it did go up again to 9.81. So it's on the alert, just so that we can keep an eye on that one. Absence as well saw a very slight increase into March and then into April. So April was at 5.88. So it's something that we will continue to track through the dashboard through the academy, but and very slight increases, but we just don't want to see that increase as a trend. We talked about in March the gender pay gap. Across the trust, 76.4% of employees are female, and there has been progress made in the mean and median pay gaps, but women continue to earn less than men and are underrepresented at those more senior levels, but overrepresented in supervisory and middle management roles, and men are underrepresented across nursing and midwifery, and typically female roles as well. And there's a gender equality reference group that Renee will be chairing, and there'll be a refreshed action plan through there, aligned to the overall EDI plan, to make sure that progress is made in reducing those gaps further. In terms of the NHS survey results, staff survey results, we talked about those in detail at the March Academy. An email has actually just dropped across the trust with the positive results, and actually a great achievement across the backdrop of sustained industrial action and media attention following the previous chair's resignation at the time the survey was open. And a good increase to the response rates of 43%, and an increase across most of the categories, achieving above the national average on all 9 of the people promised questions. So some really promising results. And I'll just pull out 1 or 2 of them. Compassion and inclusion, 7.37, engagement, 7.02, nearing some of the best results nationally. Diversity and equality scoring at 8.26, inclusion at 7. And people experiencing discrimination at work has dropped and advocacy has increased. People feeling safe in raising concerns has increased, but there is a slight drop in confidence that those concerns will be addressed. So a little bit of work to do there. And burnout and work-related stress have improved, but again, there's more work to do. So really promising results, some clear work-ons, and as evidenced in the email that's gone out to the trust today, everybody's invited to work on the actions. And there was a really great presentation by Karen at March's Academy around staff progression, and we shared the data from 2017, and turnover rate has reduced, and there's obviously work to do in growing the workforce and retaining talent, attracting the best candidates, but the number of ethnic background staff in the medical workforce now is 46%, and across each grading, admin and clerical workforce, there's been increases. Still work to do to improve ethnic background representation of band 6 and above, but focused on very positive action to develop the pipeline that has been built over the last 7 years. So it was great to refresh ourselves on that data. In April, we talked about the Sexual Safety Charter, and Sarah Turner came to present the 10 standards the trust has signed up to and shared a plan to implement them. These have to be implemented by July 24. The trust does report lower than average in the staff survey on unwanted behaviour of a sexual nature from patients, service users, families, public or colleagues, and 93 cases reported, and it's believed that that is underreported. There is support available through Thrive, Freedom to Speak Up, OCHELP, Safeguarding and HR, and there's a lot of awareness raising going on at the moment to try and increase the number of people coming forward if they have been party to that. And we talked about the National Education and Training Survey. The 23 results were shared. There's been an increase in people completing that. 7 of the 9 indicators have improved year on year. 4 quality domains, so learning environment and culture, educational governance and leadership, supporting and empowering learners and delivering curricula and assessments exceed the national average. And those of neighbouring trusts, there's positive outlier in teaching and learning, likely driven by that outstanding theatres project. And lower scores in surgery and obviously gynae are being explored. Staffing levels continue to be called out. Cost of living is also impacting retention of learners across the piece. And we celebrated the Education Service Annual Report and the People Academy Annual Report. Faye Alexander has returned as Head of Education from her own maternity leave. And there was lots of great recognition around apprenticeship, team awards, quality mark for preceptorship, clinical teaching, excellence award from BTHFT Hospital, an expansion of the team in mandatory and statutory training roles as well. And student placements increased, but feedback is very positive. There are challenges, as you would expect, around capacity, the state of the estate, budget cuts, high workload that needs to be overcome as well. In terms of the People Academy Annual Report, we've seen people come and tell their stories. We've heard a lot of the positive impact of the outstanding programmes. Our trust is looking after its people, impressive improvements in the survey results, growth of Freedom to Speak Up, EDI, kindness, stability work, and lots of hard work on recruitment and retention, and that's paid off with the turnover rate less than 10%. Lots of assurance gained as well through the dashboard, the reporting, all of the plans that have been shared, guiding of safe working hours, medical appraisal and revalidation. And I think actually the team has learned and grown as a team in terms of everybody that sits around that academy table. And I did call out 2 people, I'd like to do it here as well, who've made a particular significant difference over the last 12 months. One of them's Fahim, who's done a sterling job in leading the people area across the trust until we got Renee. And then Annie Singh, who's one of our union representatives on staff side, and he's just been so brilliant in terms of his support, his challenge, and his contribution in terms of making improvements. So well worth just a special mention.
Absolutely, thank you. So if we can just note in the minutes, Tabitha, thanks to those 2 individuals. That's great. I'm particularly liking the format of these reports. I think it works really well in terms of, you've got busy meetings and you're getting a lot of information across to us in the board in 2 pages, which is absolutely great. Just picking up on a couple of headlines that you mentioned. Gender pay gap. Again, just so that it's in people's eye line, I pulled that paper up into the main pack, but it's there for information unless Renee wanted to comment on it. And staff survey, the action plan is coming to the next public meeting, so we will be going through that then. Did you want to add anything, Renee?
No, I think that's fair. I mean, I could teach you all a lot about the metrics around gender pay gap, but that's probably something we could do outside the meeting.
Okay, thank you. Louise.
Thank you, Karen. That's very rich, all that stuff. Okay, so I've got a couple of things. One is a bit of a challenge for us, and it's a challenge that I put to my own institution as well. Gender pay gap is reducing generally in society. So how do we know that what we're doing here is what's actually reducing the pay gap? That's probably something to consider in the, are we just following the trend or are we doing something that makes a difference? Clinical academics. So these are often the top of, consultants, but in my world at the university, there's many fewer, should I say, proportionately fewer women at the most senior grade, which is professor. So just to give you an idea, so in Faculty of Medicine, Health and Leeds, if you're not clinician, it's now almost gender parity in terms of professors, which is incredible. And yet there's less than 20% of our clinical academic colleagues are professors.
That's a big gap.
It's a huge gap, isn't it? And there's lots of barriers for being, you know, and all kinds of things, but that's maybe something that we could think about as to support that, which would help the pay gap and help those people. And then the last thing is the sexual safety chart, which I think is really interesting, and it covers people who work and learn. And that's something that I'm leading on at the university, and I wondered really, we'd like to sign up to the charter as well, and a couple of other medical schools have, because I know that from student surveys that we've had over the past 7 or 8 years, when students report sexual misconduct or harassment, apart from the social environment where students are, actual placement is where it's most likely to happen. It's not always patients and students either. So I think that there's something that we could do as a trust together to work on that.
Should we take that as an action?
Yeah.
So that we make sure we don't lose that thought, okay? Cameron?
I'll take that as an action because Sarah Turner's operational leading on it for me.
Okay.
Just a little addition, I've just signed off this morning a statement to go on our trust internet that's going to be signed off by Mel around sexual safety charter, making a public statement that we've signed up to this as an organisation, which I think is a really powerful thing to do.
I think it is. We'd really like to learn from what you're doing.
It's a really clear action plan, so it's just
Yes,
as simple
it
as
is.
follow.
It really is. Yeah.
Okay, that's great. So Renee?
Yeah, Louise, you're right, to challenge us and to get us to think about the gender pay gap. And, you know, what does that really mean for us, and are we really making a difference? So as part of that reference group that I'll be chairing, I don't want to wait every annual year to see where we're at for us to find out if we're making a difference. So we'll be building some quarterly kind of results for ourselves to be able to challenge that. And I think as well around the Clinical Excellence Awards, you know, we do have a gap there, and we have a bigger gap than Airedale or, you know, some of our neighboring organizations. Some of that's around our people in some of those positions that are receiving them are not retiring, so they like working here and they're still working here. So, but it's about us understanding that data a bit more and what can we do for those people that, you know, would like to take on board some of that new opportunity around some of those bonus pays. But yes, we could do that through that reference group, but I'll take that action, Chair.
Thank you. Thank you. That's great. All right, I'm going to hand to Mel now for the Equality and Diversity Council update.
Thanks, Chair. So I'll largely take the paper as read. I'll just highlight a couple of things if I may. We changed the sort of running order around for our network updates first, and that gave rise to quite a lot of really rich conversation. It was great to be able to welcome Renee and Mark as our two new members of that group, and to hear from the networks an interesting concept around having exec sponsors for the networks. Networks aren't for execs, but it's great that the networks have someone, a good executive, to help them expedite and block the kind of barriers, real obstacles that they encounter along the way, and to give them some really sort of high-level, high-profile support. So we've managed to ascribe those roles to Saj, who's the resin body, Karen is the LGBTQ+, and Mark has in his new role as collecting as many jobs as he possibly can in his sort of first month. He's now going to be the sponsor for the Enable network. So we get some really, really good conversations, and it's great to see the evolution of these networks as they grow in strength and membership and influence. I think the Enable one really welcome your support, Mark, in trying to grow at the similar rate to sort of the other networks, and we've had some movement in the senior leadership when I say senior leadership, the kind of officer roles, if you like, of the networks that are drawn from our colleagues in the LGBTQ+ network, because people have moved on into new roles outside of the organisation. But some really good conversations, and it was National Staff Network Day. Yesterday there was a big presence in the concourse from our staff networks. then the second half of the meeting was devoted to looking more at sort of health inequalities, which is the way that we kind of play. It's a game of two halves. And I'm delighted that Mark has now arrived. It's in his job role to be our executive lead, taking over from John Holden in that space. Because Mark can really sort of grasp a couple of things that we have started prior to his arrival that are not discrete pieces of work that are just listen to self-assessment done and then we move on. This is kind of building a portfolio of actions over time that will fit with our board development as well, about how we as a board deal with tackle in a meaningful way and get the assurance that we are as an organisation health inequalities and our ambition to do that. So the first document that publication we talked about was the NHS Providers Guide into what good looks like when boards really take health inequality seriously. And we had done a very swift sort of self-assessment as an exec team about that. And Naveed, who led on that, came to present the findings across the four key domains and to highlight what we want to do next about that. So we're going to focus the improvement on those four domains and take a more detailed action plan to Quality and Patient Safety Committee and follow up the assessment in 12 months' time. I think ahead of that, we need some board development time to look at how we as a board can be more kind of scrutinising of the data. We're going to hear some more data on health inequalities, but what NHS providers have recognised is that it's sort of happening by virtue of certain imperatives and demands from the centre in a fairly piecemeal way. So if there is a focus, for example, on waiting times and how that is disproportionately felt by people who are either from a different ethnic background to white British people, or whether it's attributed to deprivation, some of the stuff that Rosie's been referring to, it's good to know about that, but what are you then able to do about it? Where can you have most impact? And is it a job that is purely for us as a secondary care provider, or is it more into the space of place? So you'll hear some of that a bit later, but I think it'd be a very good piece of work for us as a board to do. So that was that bit. And then the second was another very high profile publication that came out from BRAC, which is a charity that is all about transforming the way that we think about equality. And they've done a very detailed study on the outcome of employment tribunals that have been fought, if you like, by the NHS. And the findings were fairly consistent that led them to conclude we do inequalities, in particular race inequalities, really poorly. And our employment practices and the outcome of and how we respond to challenges around race inequality in an employment context is really not very well developed. And this is a national study. So we talked about some of that and took some comfort from the key recommendations being areas that we are already doing a lot of work in through the work of this council and the work that we've been doing under Kez's leadership as our EDI lead. However, that's not enough. So there was a challenge from Kez to all the members of the committee to how can we assemble our actions in a more cohesive way to respond to this. So one of those things we'll have, for example, on Renee's to-do list is looking at our recruitment policies and our progression policies, and are they equitably applied, and are they in practice happening versus what the policy might say needs to happen. So that's a discrete piece of work. So there's a range of things that we will be doing to really test ourselves in relation to the outcomes of that report.
Okay, any questions? Comments? Okay. And actually, it's quite a nice segue because Carl's joined us. Hello. So colleagues, can I just check, because we're meant to be having a short break now and then moving on to Carl, but as soon as we're running slightly late, Carl's here, would people be happy to progress and take that and then we'll take a break in a minute?
Chair, just need to know for Carl urgently, if that's okay.
Yeah, if that's okay. Yeah, okay. So, Carl, welcome. So, I'm Sarah, new chair of the board. Do you know everybody else around the table?
I do, yes.
Yeah, okay. All right, well, shall we hand over to you? Saj, do you want to?
Yeah, just to introduce this item, Chair, if I may. So, for colleagues who've been with the board for a while now, Carl's a very familiar face in that he comes and gives us updates on the work we've been doing, particularly focused on the access piece of health inequalities. Of course, there's the outcomes and experience as well. So this presentation very much focuses on the access, and what you'll get a feel for is how we've been building the intelligence around what's happening in terms of patients who are coming through our organisation. And it's fair to say over time we have been getting better at understanding the profile of our waiting list and the patients that are coming through, and that's really important for us because if you understand the profile of the waiting list and what's happening, then you can actually do something about it. And then just reflecting in terms of the discussion we've been having at board, and I was just making a quick note there. So actually, if you think about the discussion that Rosie was having around health inequalities and the issues that they're trying to solve, if you look at the report Mel was just giving us and the impact in terms of health inequalities, or in fact the work of people committee around the pay gaps, etc., and the inequalities that creates. I think what it highlights is that this is everybody's business. Actually, it's our business as individuals, it's our business as an organisation, but also wider than us as an organisation in place as well, if we're going to solve this. So this is part of the equation, certainly not the entirety of the solution. But I'm going to hand over to Carl and he'll quickly take us through some of the intelligence we've got. I think the important part for us is then going to be how do we connect all of this up so that it becomes meaningful action as a result of it. And we're doing things, you already pick up, we've done things and we continue to do things which are making a positive impact, but really bringing it all together and being able to then share the positive impact that we've had is going to be the key for us. So Carl, I'll hand over to you and you can take us through the presentation.
Thank you. I'll reflect a little bit, just sort of, I've presented on this quite a few times. I reflect on one thing I perhaps don't mention enough, which is whilst the time people wait for care is of course the focus of this agenda, and certainly the access element of it, we don't just look at that single point, that end point of their journey. And it's a journey, and there are lots of parts that make up that time. We do a really good job actually as an organisation of breaking down that journey into more manageable chunks to understand where some of our challenges may be and where some of our successes are, what we can learn from. I want to mention that because that's what we apply the inequalities data to, is that fuller understanding rather than just the end point. So we broke it down, including the referral part of that pathway, and I'll work with other organisations around how patients initially access our services. So I'm going to we've been doing this for a few years now, and so if you take up the second slide. Contextually, we in Bradford matched the core 20 agenda nationally works perfect for us because we know we have that variation in outcome by postcode, which is how that core 20 behind D1 and 2 works essentially. So we knew that was something for us to focus in on. Initially, it was to make sure we could use our data in a way that would support this, and we did that first. Secondly, we had to say, well, how do we take that insight we're generating from looking at our waiting lists through this lens of core 20 and the other metrics we can apply to take some action? And that was to work internally across, both the access, the experience, the outcome patients get, but to work externally with partners around access to care and how patients aren't accessing our services, and how we can improve things for the patients who perhaps aren't getting equity of access through various reasons. And then this year we've been given some more guidance on what we should be doing in relation to the visibility of that insight and how we should make others aware of what we know to our waiting list. So we've combined all that to get a bit of an update on where we're at. So we take us to the next slide. So in relation to our data, we've applied IMD, ethnicity, age, sex, and LD data items, and they are now available with the master patient index, and therefore joinable to all of the analysis we do, which is why I preambled at the start around that analysis that we do. So that gives the context. We look at our waiting list in lots of different ways, and we can do all of that analysis with this lens applied, and that's the key. The core 20 cohort, we've mapped that using the national data sets. So we can break down our data as well into, we look at the core 20 and the non-core 20 population on our waiting list as a starter. And then we look into the other variables thereafter. We share that analysis internally, both at this sort of time forum, but also with people working on this day to day. It feeds into the weekly access cycle. So every week we're looking at our waiting lists, looking at how we're progressing the improvements we intended, and then trying to take action to areas which aren't where we expect them to be. So a balance of planning for tomorrow with the delivering of today's action. And we can look at that when required with this lens applied to it. We saw specific areas of actions we've worked specifically on relations with learning disability and trying to improve access for that cohort. And we can look at that weekly. And we've looked at DNA rates. I'll come on to why again, just to reiterate the reason, because it's still there as an important part of the programme. But we have a specific dashboard which gives us the data about are the actions we're taking in response to DNA rates making a difference. So specifically, is it reducing the gap we could see between patients from a core 20 and a non-core 20 background in terms of likelihood of DNA? So we've got that available. So take us to the next slide. This, as we've described, is an iterative process. So we'll continue to refine the data we want to use and how we use it. So by its use, it will identify new things we might want to look at and new metrics to create. And it's a cycle of continuous improvement for our use of that data. Take on the next slide. We do some good stuff with the data, but there are other things we could do. So particularly this year, we'll be linking with colleagues from the Institute of Health Research who will take what I essentially do in Excel or other small programs and compare the type of analytics we could do with the data. It's not to say what we've done isn't, you know, of merit, but we could further enhance it with support from colleagues from the Institute. We also want to work, so we know regionally Calderdale have done some interesting things with this. So rather than about the data, this is about the use of the data and what they've done with the data. So I've identified that with operational colleagues to talk to their peers in Calderdale about how it's operationalised in terms of the insight. I attend, others attend lots of national conferences on this, the background to why doing this, but also how to do it. To try and learn from others and see where there are good examples of best practice. We've even replicated some of the national studies this year. So one that I'll mention later on is the Nuffield study on drop-off rates post-COVID. So we replicated that analysis to see if we have similar patterns in Bradford, particularly from one of the areas they identified nationally being a high drop-off for the Asian communities relating to cardiac, surgery and cardiac diagnostic, which we knew was an area of focus for us in Bradford, so we really want to see, did we have similar patterns? I'm kind of spoiling the surprise for later. So we didn't, if anything, had the opposite, so I have spoiled the surprise. But it was really encouraging to see that, and that relates to some the immediate updates we might go on that work here in terms of how we've engaged with the communities around accessing that type of service, case finding and early presentation. So for us, I think we can correlate to and suggest that actually that work has had a positive impact on our profile compared to others. So that's why we do some of this analysis. Yeah, and then we've also done the NHS providers, what good looks like in the self-assessment. And we've identified ourselves to be mature with regards to this problem. So hopefully it comes across as we are mature. So we've acknowledged there is more to do.
Yeah.
We'll take on the next slide. So some of the data we have, I'll run through some of what we've been looking at data. Our waiting list is about 50% core 20, 50% non-core 20. Patients from core 20 are more likely to go to routine pathway and less likely to be fast tracked. And the reason I point out is that when we looked at our initial analysis on the wait list, we could see variation in wait time. When you start looking at it by referral priority, actually that variation reduces quite significantly. And the variation is generated by the type of referral. That's not to say we've got to do any more work. What we want to understand with primary care partners is that profile right? So some of the work we're doing is, are we getting the right number of fast track referrals, so cancer referrals from this population? And we're breaking that down by cancer tumour groups to understand that at that level. Equally, are we getting overrepresentation of routine referrals? And why would that be? A lot of the routine referrals are into children and family services. And we know we've got a young population. About that young population is in the core 20 more than the non-core 20 areas. So these things are starting to add up, but we keep working on the data to get that insight and understanding. And I guess that's one of the things that this presentation might not show, but what it does in doing this is it allows us to have conversations with others informed by what we know about our waiting lists better. And so I was at an event yesterday talking about ERS and the referrals into the service, and I heavily leaned on the insight from our population, from the health inequalities data, to try and suggest there are some things we could do earlier, pre-optimising the first appointment, which would support this agenda naturally, in terms of attendance management, reducing DNAs, but also understanding the population and how they want to access our services before they do. So, it just naturally feeds into that type of approach. I won't be doing that. That's my example. I imagine everyone on the table has a similar example. I'll take us on to the next slide. One of the big things we did see is that, and that top headline is still true a year later, and that is patients from a core 20 are twice as likely to DNA as those not from. I think a lot of work in the last year to reduce DNA rates, where it's been successful, it's reduced DNA rates globally for all patients. So the likelihood of DNA is still the same, it's still twice as likely for a core 20 patient. They're less likely to DNA in some areas, but still more likely than their counterparts from non-core 20 postcodes. So that's still an area we want to focus in on. And we've talked with, through the institute work with Mike, and some of the community groups we have access to, is speaking to them to understand. And I come on to that a little bit later, actually. One of the areas to improve is this is great given an aggregate position, but an individual patient's journey will not match that aggregate all the time. So speaking to patient groups around the different experiences they have will give us the next level of insight around this agenda. So we plan to do that to understand what barriers to access could we overcome in terms of perhaps that first appointment, or even the presentation at a general practice and onward referral to us on the right pathway. So that becomes a big area of focus for us. We did see a strong correlation between DNA rates and age. So that seemed to be the variable within the core 20 population, which had more drive on likelihood of DNA rather than ethnicity or some of the other available demographics. So we know the younger population in the more deprived areas are those that are least likely to, or most likely to DNA. So we can work with them and try and understand why. I'll take the next slide. In terms of treatment, I think one of the big things I talked about the last bullet point, which was replicating that national study. One of the things we did see is time to treatment did vary, but by original so ultimately end on a lower priority treatment pathway. So as a result, that explains the current variance. Again, it's a bit like the referrals. The trigger there isn't to accept that as the position, but to understand why patients with core 20 are more likely to end on a less urgent referral. And it might be the demographics of the population, younger, different presentation type into the more routine children, in-person, family type service. Could explain that, but we want to explore it further. And it is also supported by, I don't know if this slide is okay, if you take on to the next slide. In terms of cancer, we looked at specifically. So some of the cancer data does help support this understanding too. So that the prevalence of cancer by community does look to be different. So in terms of skin cancer referrals, you are much less likely, so not just less likely, but much less likely. Only 20% of the skin cancer referrals are core 20, 80% of non-core 20 population. What we did see, and the treatment rates per referral are matching between the communities, so it didn't look like we're getting inappropriate referrals or less or more inappropriate referrals from a different community. It looked well distributed in terms of conversion rate. But what we did see, we saw an increase in referrals during the summer. I thought that's an interesting data set to have a look at. Was that increase proportional? And actually it wasn't. The increase we saw in skin cancer referrals over the summer actually doubled the amount of, or twice as much that was from the core 20 population, which suggests there may be some work to do with that community in terms of coming forward. So we worked with Cancer Alliance to understand the presentation. I think when we looked at it originally, we thought skin cancer prevalence by ethnicity, there were national data sets on this, and that could explain some of it. But actually what I wasn't aware of as I spoke to Jason at Cancer Alliance is there is a connection between skin cancer and deprivation and skin cancer and education in terms of the application of sunscreen. So as communities start to holiday abroad again, post-COVID, perhaps that could explain some of the increase from that more deprived area. So it's a hypothesis rather than a strong statement, but it's giving us stuff to look at and explore further our data. One of the things we see, so part of the cancer demand analysis is just trying to understand, is it right that we've got fewer referrals from the core 20 population? One of the areas where we do see that is breast cancer. So breast cancer, it does seem to be more prevalent in the non-core 20 population, and the awareness campaigns at the minute, increasing the amount of breast cancer referral we get, that could be explained why, despite some of the work we're doing, we're not seeing a shift in the dial in terms of that split between core 20 and non-core. So we're going to continue to monitor that. It just really kind of reinforces the need to take the cancer data and look at it tumour group by tumour group rather than as a global fast track or cancer demand. You have to look at it at an individual level, so we're doing that. Digging at the next slide. So updated findings, I've kind of explored this, but yeah, more likely to be a routine pathway, more likely to be less likely to be a cancer pathway. We can't see evidence to explain the variance in prioritisation. So we think, depending on how you refer through, you will be fairly prioritised for the treatment you require. So the work is probably earlier in the pathway to make sure people are coming in the first place and coming in a timely way. I think the next one in terms of improvements is continuing that work with others. So working with ACT is one and with the Institute. So there's a kind of, we're not in the DNA work, almost taking a dual approach here. So for ACT is one, we're working with primary care and PCNs to understand referral practices, but for the Institute and some of their community groups, we're working with the patients themselves. So together we're hoping to get understanding by community areas what some of the challenges currently are for us to support and overcome in terms of making sure we get the referrals we should get. And we get them in the way that we should come to with the information we need to pre-optimise that first appointment. So we get patients going through our services in a timely manner because we are maximising what we can do when we first see them. We utilise health data to support CHUs to come up with some of their action plans so they can target specifically at a service level, because every service will be slightly different. One of the things we've done this year, so that conversation, that understanding of this agenda, so we've added an addendum. We've got the wire access policy as the trusts do. We've added an addendum specifically about attendance and the way in which we're going to support our understanding of and improving attendance related to the communities who aren't and who have the poorer outcomes. So it's influenced our policy in that sense to make sure we've got an approach that is strongly linked to reducing health inequalities and not necessarily, and I guess it's from an angle of promoting that access policy should have an element of positive impact on that agenda. Yeah, I think that's probably that slide. Next slide. That's one. Oh, some bits to be done. I lost track of where I was.
That's great, thank you. Fascinating. Just picking up on the DNA point, and you said it was linked to age. What kind of age threshold? Are you talking about children?
No, it's so
Young adults?
Young adults, predominantly, yeah.
Okay. I come from a children's background, so we didn't call it do not attend, we call it was not brought.
Right, yeah.
You know, because that's actually an element of neglect if a child is not brought for an appointment.
Yeah, okay. Just being like that, planning for the pediatric team, followed by the past meeting with the pediatric team, looking at some of the work related to inequalities and so some really good stuff happening here with regards to promoting attendance. I think we're going to pilot, I don't know if this is hot off the press, some of the options around community clinics, so taking our clinicians closer to our communities in paediatrics. They're really keen to do it.
Yeah.
You know, it links with all, it ties everything together to help inequalities, to DNA rates, the patient experience.
Great. Okay, so I've got 4 hands up. I'm going to take the questions and then if you could just respond back at the end, is that okay?
That's okay.
Yeah, so we've got Paul.
Yeah, two quick comments actually. One, the digital element of this, because there may be a default sense that a lot of energy going into the use of the NHS app. I think we should start using some of this analysis to influence the fact that that's not going to bridge the connection to the young adult population that we're talking about. So we should be influencing nationally to make sure that there's not too much of a recession in that space. We need different solutions. And the other one is well declared, as I'm a trustee of Yorkshire Cancer Research. The more I listen to the depth and detail that we're talking about here, the more opportunity there is to put positive proposals forward for investment to that body that would allow us to go into some more depth around those condition-specific responses in relation to cancer. And I was very taken by the one about application of sun cream and so on and so forth. So again, with this, and maybe linking back to Rosie, you know, some sort of triangle that says, what do we know in ops and performance? What do we have in our research base? And how can we tap into some of what we found? Good point. Thank you. Right.
Thanks, Eric. Cool. I mean, it's brilliant work, and I think, you know, with this depth of understanding about the variation, and it really changes some of the conclusions you might jump to falsely about reasons for different patterns of attendance referral, whatever it might be. So yeah, congratulations, really good work. The specific question I have is in terms of cancer, thinking particularly, so you've explained really well why we might be seeing a different pattern of referrals according to the core 20 and non-core 20. Do we see any difference in stage of presentation of cancer? Just thinking that, you know, what one hypothesis might be that if you're a patient within the core 20 group, you might be less likely to seek early medical attention than if you're not, just because of, you know, education, etc., and access to services. Have we seen, you know, do we see any difference in stage of presentation between core 20 and non-core 20 patients in cancer in particular?
So indirectly, I think we do. So I haven't been able to get staging data to join to the analysis yet. So that's a future piece of work. But what we can look at is the priority of patient post decision to treat. And actually, there was the urology and gynecology cancer. You're less likely to be referred, but more likely to be a P2 treatment per referral. So it did suggest we were getting perhaps late or no presentation from those communities with regards to those cancers. So it's an area we identified previously to explore, which is why I want the staging data, but I haven't managed to get that complete yet.
Okay, so it sounds like there's an opportunity there in terms of education and encouraging people to be aware of symptoms and present at an early stage.
Yeah, there was a potential connectivity between some of the types of diagnostic requirement on some of these cancers, and community groups perhaps are fearful of that presentation. So Mike's work on the cardiology stuff could be connected in terms of you access family groups to speak to the community to bring forward. So
okay, I'm going to plug on with my list of comments. So Karen Walker.
Thank you. I think Ray made a really good point around busting some myths. This data really goes open your eyes, and you can make assumptions, and it's just very different. So great data, and as always, it just evolves constantly. There's an analysis of the DNAs, which I know is easy said than done, because if they're not turning up for appointments, they may not want to speak about why they're not turning up. But I think there's a younger people, time off work, cost of living, kind of link here. And it would be good to understand, even if we can just look at the demographic data of those people within that DNA population. And I just wonder whether or not core 20+5, the population has changed over time. Is it static or does that move, and whether or not that would impact some of those results?
Okay, so I'm going to pursue on, if we can just hold that thought. We've got Mark.
Thanks, Sarah. I'll be quick. Obviously, lots of links to forward health equalities, which are unbelievable. Carl and I and others will pick up. There's loads to do there. A general point, which I think is important, is to say, I think what this presentation for me shows is about the need to be inquisitive and the need to challenge ourselves and to dig deep and to analyse. I think we spend so much time, this is a broad comment now, in the NHS looking at averages or performance data. It doesn't lend itself to a conversation that allows us to find easily the inequalities that exist within our services. And I think what Carl and his team seem to have done here is to start to set out some principles, some questions that we should be asking of ourselves as a board and as a broader organisation to help us find where exactly the issues are, because it requires really focused work to address some of these things. So that's something we'll pick up on, and I'd like to come back on in relation to health more generally. And then the last thing is, Carl made reference to work happening at Calderdale, which I'm aware of from my previous role, and also at Mid Yorkshire, who are doing some really interesting work in this space. To give colleagues just a little flavour of that, in Mid Yorkshire they found that patients, they looked at deprivation groups, so those patients who are most deprived in an emergency situation, waited longest for the ambulance to arrive at their house, spent the most time with the ambulance, spent the most time, were most likely to be waiting and be privy to an ambulance handling delay when they arrived at A&E, spend the most time in A&E, obviously were the worst performers in 4-hour target. So it was issue after issue after issue after issue. And if you're asking the right questions, you're not finding to put the right solutions in place. So I can connect with colleagues as well over the other side of the patch and we'll do some of that work.
That's great, Mark. Thank you. Julie?
First of all, when Carl comes as a member of Finance and Compliance Academy, so I always feel like a proud aunt. When it's Shaggy's presentation, so like I say, I sit next to him like a proud aunt. Great piece of work and great understanding. And it links to a lot of other papers we've talked about today. I wonder how much of that data we share with the research team, because Rosie came from Born in Bradford today and talked about the work with schools. And I wonder how many links we make across the data we share today and the work the research team doing.
Yeah, good point. Okay. And Karen, thank you. 3 points. So first of all, we talked about the change in policy that we've made. That was on the back of a complaint, as you remember. And interestingly, it was the West Yorkshire policy, because we were nervous about changing it. We do an equality impact assessment for all of our policies, but there's just been another example only last week where another of our policies had impacted poorly on Sunday. So I think we really need to look at the different lens of how we look at our policies, because I think how we've been doing it is probably quite a traditional way of doing that. We think differently. Second point is around screening. So do we know that what's the uptake, things like breast screening, smear and all those things? And also, do we know that it is people not accessing the GP and getting referred on a fast track, or is it that people aren't just, or the GP is choosing not to refer them on a fast track? Because depending on the answer to that question would depend on where we target. And the final thing is around messaging. And again, I'll go back to the maternity example around reduced fecal movements, which is we completely changed our messaging. We used pictures, we found a way of getting it as part of something that they would hold, this wallet. So how are we really proactively getting messages out to our community? Because that was going to be key as well. Yeah. Okay, thanks for that, Karen. So,
I will be I didn't catch your eye as you go. I haven't learned than that. I think if Julie's like a proud aunt, that makes me a proud father, Carl, because he used to work for me when he was there, but all that. So he started off on the Anglo collection project. I like the research. I'm really interested in how this changes things and actually the prioritisation, not just, for example, we say treatment dates are given fairly on surgical waiting lists. what does fair mean in that?
Yeah.
And is there an element of clinical prioritisation, all other things being equal, of people from poor 20 places?
Yeah, yeah. So there was a lot of things
There was.
thrown at you there, Carl.
It's fine. With regards to the children and people's DNA rates, we phone every DNA and ask why, and talked to the team this morning. The information we get back doesn't match the information we get from the community when we go and speak to them. I think when put on the spot about why you didn't come, it's easy to have forgotten than it is to explain something you may not want to explain over the phone. So I think that's what we observed. So I think it reinforces that need to go out and actually speak to the community to understand it in more detail, which they have actually done, and I think they could do a bit more of, but they have actually started to do that. So that was one question for definite. Forgetting where
I've got a list.
I think some of the questions actually are a bit reflective in terms of what to present next time, in terms of some of that impact data that's coming through. Yeah.
And I think from my perspective, Sarah, just on that, I think there's a couple of things we need to do. So we were listing there what our analysis is showing, but whilst we've undertaken this analysis, we've been doing things as well. And if we're not careful, we'll forget the things we've done that have made the difference. So I think one of the things I'm going to ask Carl to do as part of the reflection is to start collecting the things we've done. So for example, I know the work we've done on learning disability, which was approved through the board, and it was a change in terms of the prioritisation that we were doing. We have positively impacted, I believe, the patients with a learning disability who are coming through treatment. We need to capture that and we need to build on that. We have, as a direct result of some of the work we've been doing in terms of the DNA rates, with doctor, what we're able to do is we've changed the ability for patients to be able to go in and interact on a See Me Sooner app. And what that allows us to do, our hypothesis or theory there is that patients from a cohort, the core 20 group, for the very reasons Karen highlighted in terms of job availability, 0-hour contract, things like that, their ability to come to an appointment might not be the same as perhaps what we might have in terms of access. So if you were able to interact with the doctor, see me sooner element of it, if I knew, oh, well, I've got an appointment, there's an appointment available tomorrow, I'm not working tomorrow, I can quickly look into that rather than having 6 weeks ahead. So there's things like that that we're doing which we need to collect. In terms of what we feel we're confident, and this is the response to the cancer question, is that it's our belief that once you get into the hospital system, based on your presentation, we're prioritising, bearing in mind what you've just said about fairly, we're prioritising people once they're in the system at an equal priority. So what's clearly very different is, depending on where you are within a core 20 population or not a core 20 population, the likelihood of you coming in as a fast track or a non-fast track is different. So that's some work we need to do with the community and better education. And there's loads of reasons why that might be, whether people are better able to articulate their condition or their issues, whether they can recognise the signs and be able to talk to the GP, how quickly they might be able to get in to see their GP might be an issue as well. So that's another part that we need to address. And then in terms of stage of presentation, the work we've done around the lung health check programme, what that has shown us, and I can't remember all of the detail in terms of the exact numbers, is that where we've gone out into communities, where we've identified whether the patient's a smoker and they are at higher risk, we have seen a higher pickup of cancer, and we've seen that we can intervene earlier on that. So I think there's quite a lot of work that comes out of this. So I think that's sort of some of the responses, but I think for us, there's probably a reflection there which says capture all of the stuff. And the bit Karen mentioned, we've actually changed policy on the back of this, and we need to really capture that and the reasons why we've done that.
Okay, that's great. We're over time now, so I'm You're not going to give me that. So I'm going to close the debate there and say thank you, Carl, for coming. I know you'll be back to present to us again in the future, but that's been really fascinating. Thank you very much. Okay, so everybody, we are just looking at the agenda. If we can take a short break and be back for 12, and then we'll plough on with the rest of the agenda, if that's okay. All right, thank you.